My biological clock woke me at 03:30 sharp. The kitchen in my Norfolk apartment smelled faintly of yesterday's drip coffee and the absolute, disciplined silence of a single soldier. The pounding on the door shattered the quiet like machine gun fire tearing through the space. It wasn't the military police. It was Anna, my twin sister, standing on my welcome mat with bare, bleeding feet and a face swollen beyond recognition. My blood boiled instantly, but my hands went cold. The unconditional reflex of a field medic. I caught her collapsing weight, that lifeless body drifting into my arms. The stench of cheap bourbon and stale urine clinging to her clothes made my stomach knot in a mix of visceral disgust and blinding rage. She whispered through cracked, dry lips, her voice a broken reed. Mark said, "Next time he'll use the golf club." I looked in the hallway mirror. The reflection wasn't this weak, broken girl, but Sergeant Olivia Church, Naval Special Warfare. If the law couldn't protect my sister, could my skills in violence bring justice? Tonight, a crazy question popped up in the darkness. What if that monster came home and realized his usual victim had been replaced by a predator? I didn't ask questions. Not yet. I guided Anna to the beige sofa in the living room and flipped the overhead lights to maximum brightness. The harsh LED glare exposed the naked truth that the shadows on the porch had tried to hide. I forced myself to blink away the sisterly horror. I couldn't look at her with the eyes of a sibling right now. I had to look at her as a tactical casualty, a mission. I dropped my go bag on the coffee table and ripped open the trauma kit. I snapped on a pair of blue nitrile gloves. The snap was loud in the quiet room. "Deep breath, Anna. Focus on my voice," I ordered, my tone dropping into that flat command frequency I used downrange. I assessed the damage. Her left cheekbone wasn't just bruised, it was a map of violence. The purple was fresh, blooming rapidly, but underneath, there was a sickly yellow tint, the fading signature of a fracture from 2 weeks ago that hadn't healed before being struck again. Her lower lip was split vertically, the blood crusted in the corners. But it was the feet that made my professional detachment waver. When I gently lifted the hem of her torn nightgown, I saw the soles of her feet. They were a mess of lacerations. Tiny shards of glass were embedded deep in the soft tissue of her arches and heels. The blood had coagulated into black, sticky patches that looked like tar against her pale skin. "I'm sorry, Liv," Anna whimpered, her voice trembling so hard it was barely audible. She suddenly jerked forward, grabbing a tissue from the table and frantically trying to scrub a drop of blood that had fallen onto my hardwood floor. "I'm making a mess. I'm getting blood on your clean floor. I'm so sorry." The action hit me harder than a physical blow. She had just been tortured. She had just escaped a house of horrors. Yet, her primary concern wasn't her pain. It was the fear of inconveniencing someone. Mark hadn't just beaten her body, he had rewired her neural pathways. He had turned a vibrant woman into a terrified guest in her own existence. "Stop it," I said, reaching out to stop her hand. My voice cracked, losing its command edge. "The damn floor doesn't matter, Anna. You matter." She flinched. Her shoulders seized up and she squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for a backhand. I froze. My own sister, the girl who used to race me up the oak trees in our backyard, the one who taught me how to braid hair, was now terrified of my touch. She thought I was going to hurt her because she stained a piece of wood. I took a breath, resetting my internal gyroscope. I needed to extract the glass. I picked up the surgical tweezers. "Why, Anna?" I asked, focusing on a particularly deep shard in her left heel. "Why did he do this tonight?" She bit her split lip to stifle a scream as I pulled the glass out. I broke his whiskey glass. The crystal one." I paused, holding the bloody shard up to the light. "A glass?" "He bought it in Kentucky on a business trip," she sobbed, the tears finally mixing with the blood on her face. "He said it was irreplaceable." "It's a $20 glass, Anna," I said, my voice dangerously low. "So he made you walk on it?" "He told me. He said it was a lesson in mindfulness," she choked out. "He said if I was truly present in the moment, I wouldn't be clumsy. He made me walk back and forth across the shards so I would feel my mistake." to learn to be careful. I felt the bile rising in my throat. Mindfulness. He used the language of therapy to justify torture. And where was he? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He was standing by the kitchen island, she whispered, drinking from the bottle, watching me. He was laughing, Liv. He thought it was funny when I cried. I finished bandaging her feet, wrapping them in clean white gauze. It looked like she was wearing combat boots made of cotton. The painkillers I gave her finally kicked in, and her breathing leveled out as she drifted into a restless, chemical sleep. I sat there for a long time, watching the rise and fall of her chest. I looked at her battered face, so similar to mine, yet shaped by a completely different war. In my head, the words of the oath of enlistment echoed. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Domestic. We always think of domestic enemies as spies or traitors. But Mark Miller wasn't a terrorist in a cave in the Middle East. He was a monster in a bespoke suit, living right here in Virginia Beach, hiding behind a charming smile and a tax bracket that made people look the other way. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many monsters are hiding in plain sight like this? If you are feeling the same rage I am right now, hit that like button to show your support. And if you believe that sometimes you have to cross a line to protect family, drop a protect in the comments below. I need to know I'm not the only one willing to fight for this. I stood up, the stiffness in my joints replaced by a fluid, lethal purpose. I walked to the bedroom closet and placed my thumb on the biometric scanner of my gun safe. The mechanism whirred and clicked open. Inside, the cold, matte black steel of my Glock 19 seemed to absorb the light. Beside it lay 2 spare magazines. I remembered Grandma reading from her worn leather Bible on the porch when we were kids. Psalm 82. Defend the poor and fatherless. Deliver them out of the hand of the wicked. I stared at the gun. Tonight, God was busy. He had too many prayers to answer. I would handle this delivery myself. The smell of sizzling bacon and scrambled eggs usually signals a good morning in any American household. But in my kitchen, it smelled like tension. I plated the food, hearty, protein-rich, the kind of fuel you need before a mission, and set it down on the island. Anna sat on the bar stool, picking at her food. Her eyes weren't on the breakfast. They were glued to her cracked iPhone screen. Every time it vibrated against the granite counter, she jumped as if she'd been shocked with a taser. He's texting, Anna whispered, pushing the phone toward me with a trembling hand. I looked at the screen. The sender was saved as Hubby3. Baby, where did you go? I've been so worried. I was a little drunk last night. I'm sorry. Please come home. I bought those hydrangeas you like. Don't make me sad anymore. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the grease from the bacon. Don't believe him, I said, my voice cold and steady. This is textbook, Anna. It's the cycle of abuse, tension building, explosion, then the false honeymoon phase. He's love-bombing you to get you back in range. But maybe he's right. Anna stared down at her plate, her voice small. I was clumsy with the glass, and he's trying to make it right. He had brainwashed her so thoroughly that she was pleading guilty to his crimes. That is the insidious power of gaslighting. It doesn't just bruise your skin, it breaks your reality. I grabbed my tablet and sat down opposite her. Let's see what hubby is really up to. I pulled up Mark's Facebook profile. It was like stepping into an alternate dimension. The cover photo showed him laughing at a charity gala for disabled children, wearing a tuxedo, holding a glass of champagne. He looked like the Prince of Virginia Beach. I scrolled to his most recent post, uploaded just 2 hours ago. The geotag was the First Baptist Church on Laskin Road. The photo was a selfie of him looking somber and pious in a pew. The caption read, "Praying for my little family today. Marriage is hard work, but God blesses those with patience. Love you, Anna." I read the comments underneath. It was a chorus of praise from the community. You're a good man, Mark. Anna is so lucky to have a provider like you. God fights for those who kneel, brother. I shoved the tablet away before I threw it through the window. He was using God and the community's goodwill as a human shield. He had isolated Anna by convincing the entire world that he was a living saint and she was the unstable burden he had to carry. "Anna," I asked, looking her dead in the eye, "do you have any cash? Emergency funds?" She shook her head slowly. She reached into the pocket of her torn robe and pulled out a single platinum credit card. "It's a supplementary card," she said, shame coloring her cheeks. "He keeps the main account. Every time I swipe this, he gets an instant notification on his phone. If I spend more than $50 at the grocery store, he calls me to ask for an itemized list." I clenched my fist under the table. This man was a millionaire real estate developer. This wasn't budgeting. It was a siege. "Last week," Anna's voice wavered, "I bought a box of tampons. I got the organic kind, the ones that are a few dollars more because the cheap ones irritate me. He yelled at me for 3 days about being wasteful. He made me return them, Liv. He drove me to the pharmacy and waited in the car while I returned a box of tampons." The room went silent. The air pressure seemed to drop. A grown man, a pillar of the community, policing his wife's feminine hygiene products to assert dominance. It wasn't about the $3. It was about stripping away her dignity layer by layer until she was nothing but a raw nerve ending, waiting for his permission to exist. He wanted her to be completely dependent on him for basic survival. "If you go to the police now," I said, my mind shifting into strategic analysis mode, "he wins. He has the best lawyers in the state. He'll walk into that courtroom in his 3-piece suit, show them your history of clumsiness, show them his charity work, and paint you as hysterical or mentally unstable. He has the money and the connections to bury you." "So what do I do?" Anna sobbed. "I can't go back, Liv. I can't." "We need undeniable proof," I said. "Or, we need to catch him when the mask is off." I stood up and walked over to the oven. I stared at my reflection in the dark, smoked glass of the oven door. I saw the same high cheekbones, the same jawline, the same eyes. We were identical twins. The only difference was 10 years of military physical training and a haircut. But hair can be fixed. Posture can be faked. "Anna," I said slowly, turning back to my sister. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Tonight, Mark wants his wife to come home so he can continue his game. We are going to give him exactly what he wants." I walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "But the person walking through that door won't be you." Step 1 was camouflage. I sat in a folding chair in front of the vanity mirror, while Anna worked behind me, like a frantic stage manager preparing an actor for the performance of a lifetime. The first problem was my hair. I kept mine in a functional military standard pixie cut. Low maintenance, tactical, efficient. Mark, however, preferred his wife to have long, flowing chestnut hair. He said it made her look docile and sweet. Anna's hands trembled as she clipped the extensions in. They pulled at my scalp, heavy and foreign. The hair was a shade lighter than my natural color, a soft ash brown that caught the light innocently. Next came the face. Anna squeezed a thick dollop of Dermablend onto a sponge. I knew this brand. We used it in the field to cover tattoos for undercover ops, but Anna used it to erase the map of violence Mark left on her skin. As she stippled the thick, paste-like foundation over my face to mimic her own pale, sun-deprived complexion, I felt like I was being fitted with a death mask. "You look too healthy, Liv," Anna murmured, stepping back to critique her work. She bit her lip, anxiety radiating off her. "Your shoulders, your traps. You have swimmer's shoulders. Mark knows my body. He'll see the muscles." "Don't worry," I said. I reached into Anna's go bag and pulled out an oversized beige cable knit sweater. It was shapeless, swallowing my torso whole. "This will hide the definition. The physical disguise is the easy part. It's the behavior that matters." I stood up and smoothed the sweater down over the faded floral skirt Anna had picked out. "Walk for me," Anna commanded. I turned and walked across the bedroom floor. I moved the way I had moved for the last 10 years. Spine straight, chin up, eyes scanning the horizon. I walked with the purpose of a woman who owns the space she occupies. "No, no," Anna gasped, rushing forward to stop me. Her eyes were wide with panic. God, Liv, if you walk like that, he'll hit you before you even get to the kitchen. That's insolence. You're challenging him with your shoulders. She took a deep breath, shrinking into herself. You have to walk. Like this. I watched in horror as my sister transformed. Her shoulders collapsed forward, rounding her back. Her head dipped until her chin almost touched her chest. She took small, tentative steps, placing her feet carefully, silently, as if the floorboards were rigged with pressure plates. You have to walk like you are apologizing for the space you take up, Anna whispered. Like you're sorry for even existing. I swallowed hard, a lump forming in my throat. My sister hadn't just been living in a bad marriage. She had been living in a prison camp where the rules of engagement were designed to erase her humanity. I tried to mimic her. I rounded my shoulders. I lowered my head. It felt unnatural, physically painful to suppress my training. Better, Anna nodded, though she looked sad. Now, the eyes. Rule number 1, never make direct eye contact for more than 3 seconds. 3 seconds is engagement, 4 seconds is a challenge. Copy that, I said. 3 seconds. Now the voice, she continued. Say it. I'm sorry, Mark. I'm sorry, Mark, I said. My voice was low, firm, resonant. No! Anna shook her head violently. Too confident. You sound like you're negotiating a treaty. He'll think you're being sarcastic. Pitch it up, tighten your throat, make it wobble. I closed my eyes. I imagined a gun pressed to my temple. I imagined the air being sucked out of the room. I constricted my larynx, forcing the air through a tighter passage. I'm sorry, Mark. I was wrong. The silence in the room was heavy. When I opened my eyes, Anna was wiping a tear from her cheek. That's it, she whispered. That sounds pathetic. That sounds like me. Outside, the Virginia sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room. It was time. I stood before the full-length mirror. The reflection staring back at me was a stranger. The sergeant was gone. In her place stood a fragile, broken woman in a beige sweater and a floral skirt, hunching to make herself smaller. But as I looked closer, past the makeup and the wig, I saw it. The weapon Anna didn't have. Underneath the layers of wool and silk, my body was a coiled spring of kinetic energy. My muscles were primed. My reflexes were sharp. I knew 18 different ways to neutralize a threat within arm's reach. Sun Tzu wrote, "All warfare is based on deception. Hence, when able to attack, we must seem unable." I turned away from the mirror and looked at Anna. Tonight, I said, my voice shifting back to my own for just a second, I'm going to answer the question he always asks you. Anna looked confused. What question? He always asks, who do you think you are? I picked up Anna's car keys. Tonight, he's going to find out. I left Anna at the safe house, a nondescript motel on the edge of town paid for with cash, and took her keys. Driving her Toyota Sienna felt alien. The minivan was heavy, sluggish, and smelled of vanilla air freshener and suppressed misery. It was the quintessential suburban mom car, a vehicle designed for safety and school runs. Yet tonight, I was driving it into a war zone. I pulled into the driveway of the Miller residence. It was a sprawling 2-story colonial in a subdivision where every lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. I hit the garage door opener. As the heavy door rolled up, Anna's voice echoed in my head. Make sure the tires are straight, Liv. If they're crooked, he says it shows I don't respect his property. I gritted my teeth and aligned the vehicle perfectly with the painted yellow guide on the concrete floor. I killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. I walked to the side door connecting the garage to the kitchen. The keypad blinked red. I punched in the code Anna had given me, Mark's birthday. Of course, even the security system was a monument to his ego. The lock beeped and the deadbolt slid back with a heavy thud. I stepped inside. The first thing that hit me was the cold. The air conditioning was blasting, chilling the sweat on the back of my neck. The thermostat on the wall read 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Anna was naturally anemic. She froze easily. But Mark liked it cold, so the house was an icebox. The kitchen was spotless, sterile. It looked less like a place where meals were cooked and more like a showroom for high-end appliances. The granite countertops gleamed under the under-cabinet lighting. But as I moved closer, the cracks in the perfection began to show. I ran my hand along the stainless steel door of the double-wide refrigerator. There, right at eye level, was a shallow dent. It was the size of a fist. Someone had tried to buff it out, but the steel remembered. I opened the fridge. A wave of cold air hit my face. Inside, everything was arranged with psychotic precision. The milk, the orange juice, the craft beer. Every single label was facing perfectly outward, aligned like soldiers on parade. I reached out and slightly twisted a bottle of barbecue sauce so the label was off-center. My hand hovered there. I realized that for Anna, a bottle turned 45 degrees could be the catalyst for a night of terror. I closed the door and moved into the living room. It was decorated in that generic, upscale style you see in catalogs. Beige furniture, heavy drapes, expensive rugs. On the wall above the fireplace hung a framed print in cursive script, "Home Sweet Home." It hung slightly too high. It looked awkward. Curiosity piqued, I walked over and gently lifted the bottom of the frame. Behind the wholesome sentiment, the drywall was shattered. A jagged hole, about the size of a boot heel, punched straight through the plaster. He hadn't fixed it, he had just covered it up with a platitude. Live, laugh, love, cover, conceal, deny. I did a quick sweep of the ground floor, mapping the terrain. I checked the kitchen island drawers. Locked. I peered through the crack. Knives. He kept the cutlery locked up. Was he afraid she would fight back? Or was he afraid she would hurt herself to escape him? In the living room, a bottle of Woodford Reserve sat on a side table, half empty. The glass beside it was dry. He'd be thirsty when he got home. I moved to the master bedroom. The bed was made with military precision, the sheets pulled so tight you could bounce a quarter off them. I turned off the main overhead lights, leaving only a small lamp in the corner on the lowest dimmer setting. Shadows stretched across the room. Darkness was my ally. It always had been. I sat on the edge of the bed, facing the door. I placed my hands on my knees. I closed my eyes and began the box breathing technique I used before a raid. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold for 4. My heart rate dropped. My muscles loosened, ready to snap into tension at a millisecond's notice. The fear Anna had taught me to mimic was gone, replaced by the cold, hard calculation of ambush mode. I waited. 10 minutes, 15, 20. The house settled around me, creaking in the cold air. Then, light swept across the sheer curtains of the bedroom window. High beams. I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. The deep, throaty rumble of a V8 engine filled the garage, vibrating through the floorboards. Then, silence as the ignition was cut. The heavy slam of a car door echoed like a gunshot. Heavy footsteps crunched on the walkway, then transitioned to the hollow thud of boots on the wooden porch steps. Clink. Keys jingling. Scrape. Metal sliding into the lock. My heart hammered once, hard against my ribs, then steadied into a slow, predatory rhythm. I lowered my head, rounded my shoulders, and shrunk into the oversized sweater. The front door opened. A gust of humid night air rushed in, carrying the heavy, cloying scent of expensive cologne and stale bourbon. The monster was home. The bedroom door swung open, and the air shifted instantly. The sterile, cold atmosphere was invaded by a wave of expensive cologne. Santal 33 mixed with the sour, chemical tang of processed scotch. Mark stood in the doorway. He was a handsome man, objectively speaking. Tall, jawline like a granite block, hair perfectly coiffed even after a long day. But his eyes were glassy, swimming in a pool of liquid arrogance. He didn't look at me. Not really. He looked through me, the way you look at a piece of furniture that you're vaguely annoyed with. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, an Armani, custom-fitted, and let it drop to the floor right in front of where I was sitting on the edge of the bed. "Hang it up," he barked. 2 syllables, no subject, no politeness. just a command to a subordinate. My instinct was to stand up and drive my heel into his solar plexus. Instead, I forced my body to shrink. I stood up slowly, my hands trembling, a calculated performance of fear. I picked up the jacket. It was still warm from his body heat. He watched me, a sneer curling his lip. Back already? I thought you'd still be crying to your Rambo sister. I told you, Anna, she can't save you. She's too busy playing soldier in the desert. He laughed, a dry, hacking sound. Probably killing civilians in Iraq to feel tough because she couldn't cut it as a real woman here. The rage flared in my chest like a phosphorus grenade. He was insulting the uniform, insulting my service, insulting me to my face without even knowing it. But I swallowed the bile. I turned my back to him and hung the jacket on a wooden hanger, smoothing the shoulders with meticulous care. Hungry! Something hit the mattress behind me with a wet thud. I turned around. A white styrofoam to-go box sat on the pristine duvet. The lid had popped open upon impact. Inside lay the carcass of a dinner, half a ribeye steak, cold and congealing in its own white grease, surrounded by limp, soggy truffle fries. Eat it, Mark said, loosening his silk tie. That's legitimate Japanese Wagyu. $100 an ounce. Low-class trash like you wouldn't know what that tastes like if I didn't let you have my leftovers. He walked toward me, swaying slightly. The smell of alcohol was overpowering now, radiating off his pores. He stopped inches from my face. I could see the broken capillaries in his eyes. He raised his index finger and poked me hard in the forehead. Thump. Do you know what I had to deal with tonight? Thump. Another poke, harder. My head snapped back slightly. My partners asked where my lovely wife was. I had to lie. I had to tell them you had a migraine. Again. Thump. You are an embarrassment, Anna. You are a social liability, a parasite attached to my wallet. I stared at his shiny leather shoes, keeping my breathing shallow. He wasn't just venting. He was dismantling a human being. He was stripping away value until there was nothing left but gratitude for his abuse. He began to pace around me, circling like a shark sensing blood in the water. You know, my new executive assistant, Sarah. She's 22, fresh out of Stanford, sharp as a tack. He paused behind me, his breath hot on my ear. She looks at me with total admiration. She listens when I speak. She understands the pressure I'm under. She's vibrant. He walked back around to face me, his expression twisting into pure disgust. And then I come home to this. To you. His eyes raked over my body, dismissing me entirely. What do you bring to the table, Anna? Tell me. You can't even give me a son. Your womb is as empty as your head. Barren. Just a dried-up husk costing me money every month. The silence in the room stretched thin, vibrating with tension. I didn't move. I didn't cry. And that was my mistake. Mark didn't want silence. He wanted the payoff. He wanted the tears, the begging, the validation of his power. My lack of reaction was an insult to his authority. Mute now, he roared, his face flushing a deep, dangerous crimson. You think ignoring me makes this go away? The air pressure in the room seemed to drop to zero. I saw his shoulder drop, his hips torque, the telegraphing of a strike. He raised his hand. It was a wide, open-palmed swing, the backhand he had used 100 times before to keep Anna in line. Let me teach you how to be a grateful wife, he hissed. The hand came down, slicing through the air. In that fraction of a second, time didn't just slow down, it crystallized. I saw the dust motes dancing in the lamplight. I saw the sweat on his upper lip. I saw the absolute certainty of violence in his eyes. But the woman cowering before him dissolved. The facade of Anna melted away. I didn't flinch. I didn't close my eyes. Instead, I snapped my head up. For the first time all night, I locked eyes with him. I didn't look at his nose or his chin. I looked straight into his dilated pupils with the predatory focus of a sniper acquiring a target. Mark saw it. In the microsecond before his hand could make contact, he saw the shift. He saw the fear vanish, replaced by a cold, abyssal darkness that looked back at him. Big mistake, Mark. The palm of his hand was inches from my face. In his mind, The strike had already landed. He was already anticipating the sound of flesh slapping flesh, the whimper of his wife, the rush of power that comes from hurting someone smaller than you. But he wasn't dealing with a wife. He was dealing with a warhead. I didn't think. I didn't decide. My body simply engaged the protocols etched into my nervous system through thousands of hours of repetition in the kill houses of Dam Neck. My left forearm shot up in a tight, vertical block, intercepting his wrist mid-swing. The impact jarred my bone, but I didn't flinch. Before his brain could even register that his attack had been stopped, my right hand snaked out. I clamped onto his wrist, my thumb digging viciously into the pressure point between the radius and ulna. I stepped in, invading his center of gravity, and used his own forward momentum as a fulcrum. I torqued his wrist outward and down. Crack! The sound was dry and loud, like a dead branch snapping in a winter forest. It echoed off the hardwood floors and the high ceilings. Ow! Mark's scream wasn't a roar. It was a high-pitched, incredulous shriek. The authority, the arrogance, the masculinity. It all evaporated instantly. He dropped to his knees, not by choice, but because the mechanical leverage of the joint lock gave him no other option. If he didn't go down, his arm would spiral fracture. I didn't let go. I wasn't done. I pivoted on my heel, maintaining the pressure, and spun him face down onto the floor. I shoved his face into the expensive Persian rug, the one he had forbidden Anna from walking on with shoes. I dropped my weight, driving my knee directly into the small of his back, pinning his spine to the floor. I yanked his broken wrist high up between his shoulder blades in a hammerlock. He was completely immobilized. A 200-pound man, neutralized in less than 3 seconds. "Does that hurt, Mark?" I whispered directly into his ear. I didn't use the trembling, high-pitched voice of Anna anymore. I dropped the act. My voice was low, steel hard, the voice of a non-commissioned officer giving orders under fire. Mark thrashed beneath me, panic overriding the pain. Who are you? Where is Anna? You crazy bitch!" I applied a fraction more pressure to his wrist. He squealed like a stuck pig. "Anna sends her regards," I said, leaning in close so he could smell the absence of fear on me. "And she asked me to tell you that the Wagyu steak is cold. You can eat it yourself." I released him and shoved him away. He scrambled backward, crab-walking across the floor, clutching his limp, swelling wrist against his chest. He backed until he hit the dresser, his eyes wide, staring at me as if I were a demon that had just crawled out of hell. I stood up slowly. I rolled my shoulders back, shedding the hunch. I lifted my chin. I expanded my chest, letting my full height and presence fill the room. The oversized beige sweater didn't look like a blanket anymore. It looked like camouflage over armor. The dim lamp in the corner cast long shadows across my face, turning my eyes into dark, hollow pits. "You like using violence to teach lessons, don't you, Mark?" I took one step toward him. He flinched and scrambled sideways, knocking over a vase. It shattered, another broken thing in a house full of them. You're Olivia," he stammered, his face draining of all color. This is home invasion. I'll call the police. I'll have you arrested." "Call them," I said. I reached into the pocket of the Armani jacket hanging on the rack, pulled out his iPhone, and tossed it onto the floor at his feet. It slid across the wood and stopped right in front of him. "Call 911 right now. Put it on speaker. Let's tell the officers about the glass in Anna's feet. Let's tell them about the fractured cheekbone. Let's see who they arrest first." He looked at the phone. His good hand hovered over it, shaking uncontrollably. But he didn't pick it up. He knew. He knew that his carefully constructed facade of the perfect husband wouldn't survive a police report. He knew he had lost. If seeing a bully get exactly what he deserves makes your blood pump a little faster, hit that like button right now. And if you believe that justice sometimes needs a heavy hand, type "justice" in the comments. Let me know I'm not fighting this alone. I crouched down, balancing on the balls of my feet, putting myself at eye level with him. I stared straight into his wet, terrified eyes. I wanted him to see me. Really see me. Listen to me closely, Mark Miller. I have hunted men in places you are too afraid to even look at on a map, I have looked into the eyes of people who would kill you for your watch, and I didn't blink. You? You're just a coward who gets off on hurting women. I leaned in. Tonight, I'm not going to kill you. That would be too easy. You'd be a martyr. No, I'm going to take the only thing you actually care about, your reputation, your money, your power. I reached into the pocket of my skirt and pulled out a small black digital recorder. The tiny red LED light was blinking steadily. Recording. Every word you said tonight, I said, holding it up. The insults about your partners, the confession about your mistress, Sarah, the abuse. I have it all. And I also have a copy of the medical report from the ER regarding Anna's injuries this morning. Mark looked at the recorder, then at me. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Then, he broke. He didn't fight back. He didn't rage. He slumped against the dresser, buried his face in his good hand, and started to sob. Not tears of remorse. Tears of a spoiled child who had finally been caught. Please, he blubbered, snot running down his nose. My reputation, my mom. She'll die if she finds out. I looked down at him with zero pity. You should have thought about that before you made my sister walk on glass. I dragged the heavy leather wing-back chair from the corner of the room and planted it right in front of Mark. I sat down, crossing my legs, looking down at him. He was curled up on the rug, clutching his wrist, his expensive suit rumpled and stained with snot and tears. The power dynamic in the room had flipped 180 degrees. I have two options for you, Mark, I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion, like a meteorologist reading a storm warning. He looked up, sniffing loudly. Option 1, I held up a finger. I call 911. The police arrive. I show them the medical report. You go to jail for domestic battery. But that's just the appetizer. While you were passed out earlier, I took the liberty of installing a little piece of software on your phone. It cloned your data. Mark's eyes widened. You hacked me? I audited you, I corrected. I saw the text to your accountant about the offshore accounts you're using to hide assets from the IRS. That's federal tax evasion. And I saw the text to Sarah. She's 19, Mark. Technically legal, sure, but in the Commonwealth of Virginia, adultery is still a crime. Imagine the headlines. Pious pillar of the community indicted for beating wife and cheating with teenager. Your business will be radioactive. You'll be fresh meat in the county jail. Mark shuddered. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He knew that in his world, reputation was currency, and I was holding a match to his bank vault. Option 2, I continued, reaching into my waistband and pulling out a folded manila envelope. I tossed it onto the floor in front of him. You sign this. He reached for the papers with his trembling left hand. What is it? An uncontested divorce settlement, I said. I had a JAG lawyer friend draft the basics this morning. It grants Anna full ownership of this house and 60% of all liquid assets as a settlement for pain and suffering. 60%? Mark's head snapped up, a flash of his old greed pushing through the fear. You're out of your mind. I earned that money. She's nothing. I didn't argue. I simply pulled the digital recorder from my pocket and pressed play. His own voice, slurred and hateful from 10 minutes ago, filled the room. You are a parasite. The Wagyu is wasted on trash like you. I wonder what the Virginia Beach Chamber of Commerce would think of this recording, I mused aloud. Or the deacon board at your Baptist church. Mark lunged for the pen I held out. He snatched it, uncapping it with his teeth because his right hand was useless. He scribbled his signature on the dotted line. It was messy, jagged, like the handwriting of a child, but it was legally binding. There, he spat, throwing the pen down. Take it, just... Please, don't release the audio. My mother, she's 70 years old. She has a heart condition. If she finds out I'm like this, it will kill her. I stared at him, marveling at the narcissism. Even now, he was the victim. Your mother, I asked quietly. What about Anna's mother? What do you think it did to her knowing her daughter was being beaten black and blue by a man who promised to cherish her? I gathered the papers and secured them in my pocket. One last thing. I stood up and walked over to the walk-in closet. I knew exactly where it was. Mark liked to brag about his home defense setup. I pulled down the Mossberg 500 pump-action shotgun from the top shelf. "Hey, that's mine," Mark yelled weakly from the floor. I marched back into the bedroom, racking the slide. A live red shell ejected and clattered onto the floor. I sat on the edge of the bed and began to field-strip the weapon. My hands moved with the muscle memory of 1,000 drills. Unscrew the takedown screw, remove the barrel. Pop the trigger housing pin. Slide the trigger group out. Remove the bolt carrier. In less than 30 seconds, his prized weapon was a pile of useless metal and plastic scattered across the duvet. "You don't deserve to hold a weapon," I said, looking him in the eye. "A gun is a tool for protection. In your hands, it's just another bullying stick." I picked up the last live round from the floor. Mark watched me, terrified I was going to load it. Instead, I walked over to the side table where his glass of bourbon sat, the one he had been drinking while he watched Anna walk on glass. Plink. I dropped the 12-gauge shell into the amber liquid. It sank to the bottom, bubbles rising around the brass casing. "Have a drink, Mark," I said. "Toast to your wife's freedom." I turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't look back. I left him sitting there in the ruins of his ego, surrounded by gun parts and divorce papers. The walk to the minivan felt different this time. The air outside was crisp, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. It filled my lungs, cleansing away the scent of Mark's cologne. I climbed into the driver's seat of the Toyota Sienna and locked the doors. I pulled out my burner phone and dialed the number for the motel. Anna picked up on the first ring. "Liv?" "It's done," I said, starting the engine. "He signed. The house is yours. The money is yours." There was silence on the other end. Then a sound I will never forget. A gasp that turned into a sob, but not a sob of pain. It was the sound of a prisoner stepping out into the sunlight for the first time in 5 years. "He's gone," she whispered. "He's gone, Anna," I said, putting the car in reverse. "You're free." As I drove away from that perfect suburban house of horrors, I let my own shoulders drop for the first time that night. The mission was accomplished. But the war for Anna's soul was just beginning. I pulled the Toyota Sienna into the parking lot of the safe house at exactly 02 hours. It was a nondescript, garden-style apartment complex on the quiet edge of Norfolk. The kind of place where people kept to themselves and the rent was paid in cash. I turned off the ignition. The silence that filled the car wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of Mark's house. It was just empty. My hands gripped the steering wheel for a moment, waiting for the tremors to start, the adrenaline dump. But it didn't come. I was too exhausted. I walked up the stairs to Unit 2B and unlocked the door, disengaging the deadbolt and the security chain I had installed myself just 24 hours ago. Anna was exactly where I had left her. She was curled up in the corner of the beige sofa, wrapped so tightly in a heavy wool blanket that only her face was visible. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on the door like a sentry on watch. When she saw me, she didn't jump up. She didn't run to hug me like they do in the movies. Instead, her eyes immediately scanned my body, searching for blood, for bruises, for any sign that the monster had won. "Liv?" she whispered, her voice raspy from crying. Are you okay?" I closed the door and locked it, sliding the chain back into place with a metallic clack. "I'm fine, Anna." I walked over and sat on the coffee table facing her. I pulled the folded manila envelope from my pocket, the one containing the divorce settlement signed in shaky, terrified ink, and placed it gently on her lap. "He's not fine," I said softly. "But you are. This is yours." Anna looked down at the documents. She touched the paper tentatively, as if testing to see if it was hot enough to burn her fingers. She opened it, her eyes darting across the legal jargon until they landed on the signature at the bottom. "He actually signed it," she breathed, looking up at me in disbelief. He didn't hit you?" "He wanted to," I admitted, taking off my boots. But he realized he wasn't the scariest thing in the room anymore. Anna stared at the signature for a long time. Then she looked up at me, her eyes filled with a terrifying mix of hope and fear. Liv, did you kill him? The question hung in the air, heavy and serious. She wasn't asking because she was worried about Mark's well-being. I could see it in her face. She was terrified I would go to federal prison and leave her alone again. No, I promised, reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. He's alive, broken, humiliated, and a lot poorer, but alive. I didn't ruin my life for him. And I didn't ruin yours. She let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for 5 years. Okay. I'm going to make some toast, I said, standing up. You need to eat something. I went to the small kitchenette. It was basic, cheap laminate counters, a humming refrigerator. I dropped 2 slices of white bread into the toaster and pressed the lever down. The apartment was quiet, safe. Pop. The toaster sprung up loudly. From the living room, I heard a sharp gasp and the sound of a body hitting the floor. I rushed back in. Anna had thrown herself off the sofa and was cowering behind it, her hands over her head, shaking violently. Her eyes were squeezed shut, bracing for impact. My heart broke. The papers were legal. The threat was gone. But the wiring in her brain was still fried. The sound of a toaster had triggered a survival response meant for a combat zone. Hey, it's okay, I said, dropping to my knees beside her. My voice was soft, soothing. It's just the toaster, Anna. It's just bread. You're safe. No one is coming through that door. She opened her eyes, her pupils fully dilated. For a split second, she looked confused, expecting to see Mark standing over her. Then recognition flooded back. She collapsed into my arms, burying her face in the shoulder of my sweater. And then, she cried. It wasn't the polite, silent weeping she had done earlier to avoid attention. This was ugly, guttural sobbing. It was the sound of a dam breaking. Her body shook with the force of it, releasing years of held-back terror, years of walking on eggshells, years of smiling when she wanted to scream. It was the total physical collapse that comes when survival mode finally switches off. I just held her. I rocked her back and forth on the cheap carpet until the sobs turned into hiccups, and the hiccups turned into silence. The house is yours now, I said quietly, stroking her hair. Do you want to go back? We can change the locks. We can paint the walls. Anna shook her head violently against my chest. No, Liv, I can't. Okay, we don't have to. It smells like him, she whispered. Even when he's not there. The walls, they saw everything. It smells like fear. We'll sell it, I said firmly. We'll take the money. You can buy a new place, anywhere you want. Anna pulled back slightly, wiping her nose with her sleeve. A tiny, fragile spark lit up in her eyes, the first sign of the old Anna. A small place, she murmured. Near the ocean. A place that smells like lavender and old books. You know, the way Mom's house used to smell. Lavender and old books, I repeated. Done. Later that night, I tucked her into the only bed in the apartment. She fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted by the emotional marathon. I turned off the bedside lamp, plunging the room into darkness. But I didn't go to the other room. Instead, I grabbed a spare pillow and the wool blanket from the sofa. I lay down on the floor right next to her bed, just like we used to do when we were kids, and a summer thunderstorm rolled off the Atlantic, shaking the windows of our childhood home. I lay there in the dark, listening to the steady, rhythmic breathing of my sister. She didn't whimper. She didn't flinch. She was just sleeping. I stared at the ceiling shadows. I had medals tucked away in a drawer back at base for operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. I had been thanked for my service by generals and politicians. I had saved lives under fire. But lying here on this cheap carpet, guarding the sleep of the one person I loved most in the world, this was the greatest victory of my life. Fall arrived in Virginia Beach with a spectacular explosion of color. The suffocating humidity of summer finally broke, replaced by crisp Atlantic breezes that turned the oak and maple trees along the boulevards into riots of gold and crimson. I pulled my truck up to the curb of a small, second-story condo complex just a few blocks from the boardwalk. It wasn't a sprawling estate like Mark's fortress with its manicured lawns and cold marble. It was modest, weathered by the salt air, and it felt real. I killed the engine and turned to Anna. For a split second, I felt like I was looking in a mirror. 2 weeks ago, she had walked into a salon and told them to cut it all off. The long chestnut extensions Mark loved were gone. The chemically straightened, docile look was history. She now sported a textured pixie cut, identical to mine, highlighting her high cheekbones and the strong jawline she had hidden for years. "Ready?" I asked. "Ready," she said, her voice steady. We walked up the stairs to Unit 204. When she unlocked the door, sunlight flooded the room, bouncing off the lightwood floors and the cream-colored walls. There were no heavy drapes here to block out the world. Just light, air, and the faint, salty scent of the ocean drifting in through the screen door. Anna spun around in the center of the empty living room, her arms wide. "It's perfect, Liv," she said, her smile reaching her eyes for the first time in years. The bruises on her face had faded weeks ago, leaving behind skin that looked fresh and alive. The external wounds had healed, but we both knew the internal work was just beginning. Later that afternoon, we traded the fresh ocean breeze for the scent of rubber mats and old sweat at Tidewater Krav Maga, a gritty gym tucked away in a strip mall. I had signed Anna up for the beginner's self-defense course, convinced that reclaiming her body was the next logical step. Anna stood looking at the heavy punching bags hanging like sides of beef, wrapping her hands with white tape. "I don't know about this," she said, hesitation creeping back into her voice. "I've never hit anything in my life." "You survived 5 years in a war zone without a weapon," I said, tightening the strap on her glove. "You're tougher than you think. You don't need to be a soldier, Anna. You just need to know that you own your space." The instructor, a burly guy named Mike, shouted for the class to begin. I stood on the sidelines, arms crossed, watching as Anna threw tentative, polite taps against the heavy bag. "Picture the fear," I called out over the thumping bass of the gym music. "Picture the moment he made you feel small, and push it away." Something clicked in her posture. I saw her stance widen. She grounded her heels and rotated her hip just like I'd shown her. Her right cross connected with the bag. Thwack. It wasn't perfect form, but it had power. Real power. She kept going, striking the bag again and again, sweating and breathing in sharp bursts. She wasn't shrinking anymore. She was taking up space. She wasn't a victim. She was a warrior in training. By the time evening rolled around, the apartment smelled of cinnamon, nutmeg, and baked apples instead of cleaning chemicals. We sat on the floor of her living room. Her furniture hadn't been delivered yet, eating slices of warm apple pie off paper plates. It was Mom's recipe, the one she used to make for us every Thanksgiving, bringing a sense of tradition to this new beginning. Anna took a sip of iced tea and set her cup down, looking thoughtfully at her left hand. The ring finger was bare, pale skin marking where the heavy platinum band used to sit. "I sold the ring," she said suddenly. I paused, fork halfway to my mouth. "Mark's ring? The 3-carat monstrosity?" "The very same," she nodded. "I got a very good price for it. It turns out blood money spends just as well as honest money." "Good for you," I said, grinning. "Put that in your savings, or take a trip to Italy." Anna shook her head. "No, I didn't keep it. I donated the entire check to the Samaritan House shelter downtown. They're building a new wing for women escaping domestic violence. I made sure it was a tax-deductible donation in my name, not his." I stared at my sister, fighting the lump forming in my throat. She had taken the ultimate symbol of her oppression, the object Mark used to mark her as his property, and turned it into a lifeline for strangers. "I'm proud of you, Anna," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You're not just saving yourself. You're saving others." "Thank you, Liv," she whispered, "for not leaving me behind." She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was firm, stronger than I remembered. The silence between us was comfortable, filled only by the distant sound of the ocean. "You know," she said softly, looking down at our joined hands, "growing up, I was always so jealous of you. You were the strong one, the brave one, I thought I was the defect, the broken twin. You were never broken, I protested gently. No, listen, she squeezed my hand. I figured it out. We played our parts. You had to be strong so you could protect me. And I had to be the weak one. Why? I asked, confused. She looked up at me, her eyes shimmering with tears in the dim light. Because if I wasn't in trouble, you wouldn't have had a reason to come home. The breath left my lungs. I had spent my entire adult life running toward gunfire, believing I was the protector, the savior. But looking at Anna now, sitting in her own home, eating pie on the floor, I realized she was right. She was my anchor. Without her, I was just a weapon without a war. For the first time in years, since before I earned my trident, I felt hot tears spill over my eyelids. I didn't wipe them away. I sat there in the golden autumn light, holding my sister's hand, and let myself cry. Not tears of grief, not tears of rage, tears of happiness. We were finally home. The air at Naval Station Norfolk has a distinct taste. It's a cocktail of salt spray, ozone, and the heavy, greasy sweetness of JP5 jet fuel burning in the engines of F-18s screaming overhead. To most people, it's noise and pollution. To me, for the last 15 years, it was the smell of home. It was the smell of purpose. I walked across the concrete grinder, the parade deck, my boots hitting the pavement with a familiar, rhythmic cadence. Around me, the base was a hive of activity. Seahawk helicopters chopped through the humid air, logistics trucks rumbled toward the piers, and squads of sailors marched in formation, their voices calling out cadence in unison. Left, 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 right, left. It was the same world I had left just a few days ago, but I was walking through it as a different woman. Before, I marched to protect a flag, an idea, a line on a map. I fought enemies who lived in caves and compounds thousands of miles away. But now, as I looked at the faces passing me, young women with anxious eyes, seasoned officers with wedding rings, I realized the battlefield wasn't just over there. It was here. It was behind the manicured lawns of Virginia Beach. It was in the quiet, desperate silence of suburban kitchens. I wasn't just fighting for the Constitution anymore. I was fighting for the Annas of the world. I stopped in front of a platoon of female recruits. They were fresh, green, barely out of boot camp. They stood at attention as I approached, their eyes locking onto the ribbons on my chest, the warfare insignia that marked me as someone who had seen the sharp end of the spear. I saw admiration in their eyes, but I also saw naivety. They thought the uniform made them bulletproof. At ease, I commanded. The tension in their shoulders dropped, but their eyes stayed glued to me. You all signed up because you wanted to fight, I said, my voice carrying over the distant roar of a C-5 Galaxy taking off. You want to be warriors. You want to hunt down bad guys. I paced the line, looking each of them in the eye. We are trained to destroy. We are trained to neutralize threats. That is the job, but do not confuse the job with the mission. I stopped in the center of the formation. The highest calling of a soldier is not to kill, it is to protect. There are people in your lives, sisters, mothers, friends, who are fighting wars you cannot see. They are fighting in their own living rooms against enemies who claim to love them. The silence on the deck was absolute. Real strength, I continued, isn't about how much pain you can inflict. It's about how much pain you can intercept. Defend your teammates, defend your families, and above all, defend your own worth. If you can't protect the person in the mirror, you can't protect anyone else. I dismissed them. As they walked away, I saw a shift in their posture. They weren't just walking like soldiers, they were walking like guardians. My personal phone buzzed against my ribs, tucked securely in the inside pocket of my uniform blouse, right over my heart. I stepped into the shadow of a hangar and pulled it out. It was a message from Anna. Attached was a photo. She was sitting in a circular nook at the Virginia Beach Public Library, surrounded by towering stacks of colorful hardcovers. A group of wide-eyed children sat cross-legged on the carpet in front of her. Anna was holding a book open, her face animated, her hand raised as if she were casting a spell. She looked radiant. The haunted, hollow look of the victim was gone. replaced by the vibrant energy of a storyteller. I read the caption beneath the photo. I'm telling them the story of a brave female knight who didn't need a prince to save her because she had a sister who taught her how to slay the dragon herself. Love you, Liv. A smile broke across my face, a genuine, unguarded smile that felt foreign on my usually stoic features. I traced her face on the screen with my thumb, then slid the phone back into my pocket, keeping it close. I looked out toward the harbor, where the gray hulls of the destroyers cut through the water. The world is full of Mark Millers. There are millions of them, insecure, narcissistic men who use their fists and their wallets to hide their own weakness. They thrive in the darkness. They rely on our silence. They count on the fact that we will be too ashamed, too scared, or too polite to fight back. But they are wrong. Darkness is only scary until you turn on the lights, and we are the lights. As long as there are women willing to break the silence, willing to stand up and say no more, the monsters don't stand a chance. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sea air. My name is Olivia Church. I am a chief petty officer. I am a warrior. I am a survivor. But as I turned to walk back toward the command center, I knew the truth. Those were just titles. I am Anna's sister. And that is the highest rank I will ever hold. The strongest person isn't the one who never falls. It's the one who knows how to stand up, wipe the blood from their mouth, and reach down to lift someone else up with them. That is the legacy. And the mission never ends. This story wasn't just about revenge against a bad man. It was about redefining what it means to be strong. For years, Anna believed her endurance made her weak, and I believed my armor made me invincible. We were both wrong. True courage isn't about how much pain you can handle in silence. It is about having the bravery to reach out your hand and say, I need help. Abuse thrives in the shadows, but it withers in the light. No matter how dark your situation feels right now, please remember that you are not a prisoner of your circumstances. You possess a voice, use it. Breaking the silence is always the first step to breaking the chains. Now, I want to turn this over to you. We all have an Anna in our lives, someone precious worth fighting for. Or maybe, right now, you are the one fighting to find your own light. If this story touched your heart or gave you a spark of hope, please hit that like button. It helps us share this message with others who might desperately need to hear it. And in the comments below, simply type, I am strong, to declare your own power today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a mission with us. Until next time, stay safe and watch each other's six.